Ben Shapiro is complaining about the racist monster he helped to create. So recently, I heard a discussion between people I knew who I was not aware they followed politics, and especially not this sort of like online politics. But they were having a discussion in real life, basically, about how people who used to listen to Ben Shapiro were being radicalized into becoming basically like far right slash white nationalists slash Nazis, whatever you want to call them. I know all three. To be as charitable as possible, all three of these groups are not the same, but there tends to be overlap between all three of these groups, and they tend to be tangentially linked at the very least. But anyway, they were talking about how people who have been radicalized, who used to be watch Ben Shapiro in 2016, are now extremely radical in 2025, or a lot of them are anyway. Some people have completely fallen off from the conservative bandwagon, conservative slash right-wing bandwagon. And I was having this conversation about that conversation with someone else I know, and basically he came to the conclusion that basically this problem of racism that Ben Shapiro is now trying to oppose is a problem of its own making. For those of you who don't know, there was recently a scandal in Minnesota where a woman named Shiloh Hendricks was harassing she called a young 5-year-old Somali boy who took her things while he was playing in the park a racial slur. A racial slur, basically the N-word, which is usually associated with black Americans, but she said to a Somali, which is actually quite interesting. But anyway, and Ben Shapiro was trying to oppose what happened, calling Shiloh Hendricks a bad person, while another person who contributes to his company, Matt Walsh, was calling Shiloh Hendricks, basically defending her actions. To be as charitable as possible, Matt Walsh was not defending the use of an N-word, but he was defending her opposing what he calls cancel culture. Matt Walsh is a lot more, I'm going to say he's a lot more racist than he lets on, and you can tell. Ben Shapiro was trying to hold it down, but a lot of his audience at the Daily Wire, they agreed more with Matt Walsh than Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro has created an environment. For years, he has turned a blind eye to a lot of the racist sentiment that runs undercurrent in his party and at his company and his audience. But it's very interesting to see now, when he is forced to try and condemn it, how his audience reacts and how his audience basically turns on him. His audience is also turning on him on other issues like Israel. I tend to disagree on Israel, but his audience is so blatantly anti-Semitic and racist about it. I think he's really locked himself into a corner where for years he had turned a blind eye to racist sentiment at his company and the party and his audience, especially as it relates to blacks. He tends to hire news commentators who are very who aggressively counter signal blacks and black causes, even though there are a lot of areas where black causes and Jewish causes overlap. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and that can probably be used for another video. But over years, she's turned a blind eye to all the racism against blacks. But now that we are seeing signs that it is slowly getting out of control. He is slowly losing control over the movement that he helped build. Whether Ben Shapiro believes in the racism or not is irrelevant. He turned a blind eye to it, and a lot of Republicans do not know how radical a lot of these members of Gen Z, or a lot of these Gen Z white males are. They're alienated, they're jobless, a lot of them are virgins, a lot of them don't have female contact. They have to compete with all these other groups like Indians for on the economic front, competing with blacks and Latinos on the romantic front. So they're very alienated, they're very angry, and Ben Shapiro and a lot of Republicans, they thought they could play this game they used to with like baby boomers and Gen X, where they try to turn blacks into like a scapegoat so they can use their sentiment to push pro-corporate policies. But a big reason why a lot of that worked, and why a lot of it was like a lot of the overt racism could be counter-signaled, is because boomers and Gen X were not so impoverished. They were not as impoverished as Gen Z and millennials are. They now have to try to hold back this very impoverished group of socially alienated, sexually frustrated young men, and they vastly underestimated just how dangerous the situation is. So Ben Shapiro, all of the resentment being directed at Jewish people and at Israel is mostly of his own doing. Oh, I wouldn't say that, but he had a chance to oppose it back when they were attacking blacks and Latinos, and he said nothing, and Asians, and he said nothing, and Indians, and he said nothing. Now he has to face the music.